My name is Jessica Taylor, and at 26, I thought I had found the perfect roommate situation when I moved in with Madison Wright in downtown Seattle. Madison seemed responsible, friendly, and financially stable with her job at a tech startup, making her ideal for splitting rent on our expensive two-bedroom apartment. For 8 months, we maintained what I believed was a trusting household, where we shared groceries, utilities, and gardening, and even helped each other during financial tight spots. But Madison had been systematically stealing my credit card information and making unauthorized purchases for months, thinking I wouldn't notice small charges mixed in with my regular spending. What she didn't realize was that her shopping spree had crossed into federal wire fraud territory, and the FBI Financial Crimes Unit was about to pay her a very educational visit. If you're watching this because you've dealt with roommate theft or financial fraud, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served. Trust me, you won't believe how this credit card thief's shopping addiction led to federal charges and a very dramatic arrest at our shared apartment. Madison Wright had responded to my Craigslist ad for a roommate with an impressive application that included employment verification, excellent credit score, and references from previous landlords who described her as quiet, clean, and reliable. She was 28, worked as a marketing coordinator for a growing software company, and seemed to have her financial life together in ways that made her an ideal candidate for sharing living expenses. During our initial meeting, Madison was articulate, professional, and enthusiastic about the apartment's location and amenities, making it easy to decide that we would be compatible roommates. Our living arrangement started smoothly, with Madison proving to be as responsible and considerate as her references had suggested. She paid her share of rent and utilities on time, kept common areas clean, and was respectful about noise levels and guest policies that we had discussed during our initial roommate agreement negotiations. Madison seemed to have a healthy social life, but wasn't disruptive, and she was helpful with household tasks like grocery shopping and maintenance issues that required coordination with our landlord and service providers. Madison's job at the tech startup appeared to be going well, and she frequently mentioned successful marketing campaigns, positive feedback from supervisors, and optimism about potential promotions that would increase her salary and career prospects. She dressed professionally, maintained regular work hours, and seemed to have disposable income for dining out, entertainment, and online shopping that suggested financial stability. I appreciated having a roommate who could consistently meet her financial obligations without the stress and drama that often accompanied shared living situations. About 3 months into our roommate arrangement, I started noticing small charges on my credit card statements that I didn't immediately recognize but assumed were legitimate purchases I had forgotten about during busy periods at work and social activities. The charges were typically under $50 and from retailers like Amazon, Target, and Starbucks, where I frequently shopped anyway, making them easy to overlook during quick reviews of monthly statements. I occasionally wondered about specific transactions, but generally trusted that my spending habits were responsible for all charges appearing on my accounts. The pattern continued for several months, with unfamiliar small charges appearing regularly, but never reaching amounts that would trigger fraud alerts from my credit card company or cause significant concern during casual statement reviews. The charges were cleverly sized and timed to blend in with my normal spending patterns, making them difficult to identify as fraudulent without careful analysis of every transaction and detailed comparison with my receipts and purchase records. My first real suspicion arose when I noticed a charge for premium streaming services that I had never signed up for, followed by several food delivery orders to our apartment address on days when I had been out of town for work travel. When I called the delivery company to inquire about the orders, they confirmed that the food had been delivered to someone at my address using my credit card information. But I had been in Portland attending a conference during the time frame in question. The representative suggested that I might want to review my account for unauthorized usage. This discovery prompted me to conduct a more thorough analysis of my recent credit card statements, comparing charges with my personal receipts, calendar appointments, and travel records to identify discrepancies that might indicate fraudulent activity. The systematic review revealed dozens of unauthorized charges over the past 4 months, totaling nearly $3,000 in purchases that ranged from clothing and electronics to subscription services and food deliveries that had occurred when I wasn't home. The evidence strongly suggested that someone with access to my personal information and living situation was using my credit card details for their own purchases, and the delivery address confirmed that the fraud was being committed by someone who lived in or had regular access to our apartment. Madison was the only other person with such access, and the timing of many charges coincided with periods when she was home alone while I was at work or traveling for business. When I confronted Madison about the suspicious charges, she expressed shock and concern while suggesting that our apartment building's mailroom security might be compromised, allowing strangers to intercept credit card statements or other financial information that could enable fraud. Madison offered to help me contact building management about security improvements and suggested that we both review our financial accounts for signs of unauthorized activity that might affect other residents as well. Her response seemed genuinely helpful and concerned, which initially made me question whether I was being paranoid about her potential involvement. But Madison's explanation didn't account for the delivery orders that had been placed to our specific apartment during times when only she was home, or the streaming services that someone had been accessing using devices connected to our shared internet network. The evidence was becoming increasingly difficult to explain through external theft scenarios, especially when I realized that my physical credit cards had remained in my possession throughout the period when unauthorized charges were occurring. I decided to conduct a controlled test by temporarily hiding my wallet and credit cards while monitoring my accounts for new unauthorized activity. Within a week of implementing this security measure, additional fraudulent charges appeared on my statements, including purchases from online retailers that shipped items to our apartment address. This confirmed that someone was using my credit card information rather than my physical cards and had ongoing access to account details that enabled continued unauthorized spending. The breakthrough came when I installed a small security camera in my bedroom, disguised as a phone charger, to monitor access to my personal belongings when I wasn't home. The camera captured Madison entering my room, photographing my credit card information with her phone, and then leaving without taking anything else. The recorded evidence clearly showed her systematically documenting my financial information for fraudulent use, proving that the months of unauthorized charges had been committed by my trusted roommate. Armed with video evidence of the theft, I contacted my credit card company to report the fraud and began the process of disputing the unauthorized charges that Madison had made over the previous months. The representative explained that the systematic nature of the fraud, combined with the interstate commerce aspects of online purchases, qualified the crimes as federal wire fraud that would need to be reported to the FBI Financial Crimes Unit rather than handled as simple local theft. The credit card company's fraud investigation team reviewed the evidence I provided and confirmed that the pattern of unauthorized charges met criteria for federal investigation due to the use of interstate commerce systems, electronic communication networks, and systematic financial fraud that exceeded state-level jurisdiction thresholds. They assured me that my account would be secured and that disputed charges would be reversed while law enforcement conducted their investigation into Madison's activities. I also learned that credit card fraud involving systematic theft over extended periods, especially when committed by someone in a position of trust, like a roommate or family member, carried serious federal penalties, including potential prison time and mandatory restitution payments. The FBI took such cases seriously because they often revealed patterns of behavior that affected multiple victims and required sophisticated investigative techniques to fully document the scope of criminal activity. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit contacted me within a week of my initial report, requesting detailed information about my living situation with Madison. Copies of the security camera footage, and comprehensive records of all disputed transactions that I suspected were connected to her unauthorized use of my credit card information. Special Agent Sarah Mitchell explained that roommate fraud cases often involved additional victims and criminal activities that required thorough investigation to prevent ongoing harm to other potential targets. Agent Mitchell arranged to conduct a formal interview at the FBI field office, where I provided a complete timeline of my suspicions, the evidence I had gathered, and details about Madison's behavior and lifestyle that might be relevant to understanding her financial situation and motivations for committing fraud. The interview process was professional and thorough, with agents asking detailed questions about our living arrangement, Madison's spending habits, and any other suspicious activities I might have observed. During the interview, Agent Mitchell explained that they would need to coordinate with local law enforcement to execute a search warrant for our apartment, which would allow them to examine Madison's electronic devices, financial records, and personal belongings for evidence of credit card fraud and other potential criminal activities. She warned me that the investigation process might take several months, and that I should avoid confronting Madison directly about the evidence to prevent her from destroying additional evidence or fleeing before charges could be filed. The FBI's investigation revealed that Madison's fraud extended far beyond my credit card, involving systematic theft from previous roommates, coworkers, and even family members who had trusted her with access to their personal information. Her crime spree had been ongoing for over 2 years and involved tens of thousands of dollars in unauthorized charges across multiple victims who had been targeted through her various living and work situations. The patterns suggested sophisticated criminal activity rather than impulsive financial desperation. Agent Mitchell also discovered that Madison had been using sophisticated techniques to avoid detection, including keeping individual victim losses below reporting thresholds, timing purchases to coincide with normal spending patterns, and targeting people who were unlikely to carefully monitor their financial accounts on a regular basis. Her systematic approach suggested experience with financial fraud and deliberate planning to maximize illegal income while minimizing the risk of discovery and prosecution. The search warrant was executed on a Tuesday morning when Madison was at work, allowing FBI agents and local police to thoroughly examine our apartment for evidence without alerting her to the investigation. The search revealed extensive records of stolen credit card information, fraudulent purchase histories, and electronic evidence showing that Madison had been operating a sophisticated identity theft operation that targeted people in her personal and professional networks. Madison's computer contained spreadsheets tracking victims' financial information, purchase histories showing thousands of dollars in fraudulent transactions, and communication records indicating that she had been selling stolen credit card information to other criminals as part of a broader financial fraud network. The evidence suggested that her crimes extended far beyond simple roommate theft into organized financial criminal activity that involved multiple victims and co-conspirators. The arrest happened 3 days later when Madison returned home from work to find FBI agents waiting in our apartment with a warrant for her arrest on federal wire fraud charges. Agent Mitchell later described Madison's reaction as shocked and panicked, apparently believing that her crimes had been too sophisticated and small-scale to attract federal attention. Madison initially tried to claim that any evidence found in the apartment belonged to me, but the electronic records clearly showed her devices and accounts being used for the fraudulent activities. Madison's arrest was swift and professional, with agents reading her rights and explaining the federal charges she was facing, which included wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes that carried potential sentences of up to 20 years in federal prison. The severity of the charges reflected both the systematic nature of her crimes and the multi-victim scope of her fraudulent activities that had been uncovered during the investigation. During the booking process, Madison apparently confessed to agents about the extent of her financial fraud activities, including details about other victims and criminal associates that helped the FBI identify additional cases and potential co-conspirators. Her cooperation was motivated by hopes of receiving reduced sentences. But Agent Mitchell explained that the evidence against her was so comprehensive that plea negotiations would still likely result in significant prison time and restitution requirements. The investigation ultimately identified over 30 victims of Madison's fraud schemes, with total losses exceeding $200,000 in unauthorized charges, identity theft damages, and financial account compromises. Many victims had been unaware that they had been targeted, having attributed small, unauthorized charges to their own forgotten purchases or merchant billing errors, rather than systematic criminal activity by someone they trusted. Madison's preliminary hearing revealed the full scope of her criminal enterprise, including sophisticated techniques for harvesting personal financial information, networks of criminal associates who purchased stolen credit card data, and systematic targeting of people in positions of trust and access. The federal prosecutor described her operation as one of the most extensive roommate fraud cases they had encountered, involving multiple states and dozens of victims over several years. The trial proceedings took 8 months, during which Madison attempted to negotiate plea agreements that would reduce her sentence in exchange for cooperation in identifying other victims and criminal associates. However, the evidence against her was so comprehensive that prosecutors were unwilling to offer significant concessions, ultimately resulting in her pleading guilty to multiple federal fraud charges that carried mandatory minimum sentences. Madison's sentencing hearing included victim impact statements from over 20 people whose financial security and credit ratings had been damaged by her systematic fraud activities. The judge described her crimes as particularly heinous because they involved betraying the trust of people who had welcomed her into their homes and workplaces, and imposed a sentence of 12 years in federal prison plus mandatory restitution of over $300,000 to cover victim losses and investigation costs. The restitution amount exceeded the direct financial losses because it included penalties for identity theft damages, credit monitoring services for affected victims, and law enforcement costs associated with the multi-state investigation that had been required to fully document Madison's criminal activities. The judge explained that the enhanced penalties reflected the sophisticated and systematic nature of her crimes, which had required extensive federal resources to investigate and prosecute properly. 6 months after Madison's sentencing, I received notification that she had been transferred to a federal correctional facility where she would serve her full sentence without possibility of parole due to the serious nature of federal fraud convictions. The notification included information about victim restitution payments that would begin once Madison was eligible for prison work programs. Though Agent Mitchell warned that full restitution often took many years to complete. The experience taught me valuable lessons about roommate screening, financial security, and the importance of regularly monitoring credit card statements for unauthorized activity that might indicate fraud. I also learned that federal law enforcement takes systematic financial crimes seriously, especially when they involve betrayals of trust and sophisticated criminal techniques that affect multiple victims across state lines. A year later, I testified at the trial of one of Madison's criminal associates who had been purchasing stolen credit card information from her network, helping federal prosecutors secure additional convictions in what had become a comprehensive investigation of organized financial fraud activities. My testimony helped establish the systematic nature of the criminal enterprise and the sophisticated techniques used to exploit victims' trust and financial information. The roommate who stole my credit card learned that federal wire fraud charges carry serious consequences and that betraying the trust of people who welcome you into their homes can result in over a decade in federal prison. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit doesn't take systematic financial fraud lightly, especially when it involves sophisticated criminal enterprises that target multiple victims across state lines.